Welcome to the Magdalene Voices, giving voice to those silenced for centuries through sacred conversations with beautiful, illuminating souls. I'm your host, spiritual business coach, mentor, catalyst, and facilitator, Maria Estella. I serve spiritual entrepreneurs, Magdalene's rising, and radiant beings just like you with the expansion and growth of yourself and your business, aligning you with your deep inner truth, bringing to life that which you are here to birth, and supporting you in expressing your soul's divine purpose through your being and your doing in this lifetime. If you haven't already, I highly encourage you to join my newsletter to stay connected and updated. You can do so on my website, mariaestella.com, where you can also find previous episodes and their show notes. And if you have ever wondered about your Magdalene connection and calling, and whether you are a Magdalene, I invite you to download the free Magdalene Blueprint I've created for you. Go to mariaestella.com/AYM to get it. Finally, today I'm excited to announce that the doors have been opened to Mastery Through Love. Mastery Through Love is a 6-week healing journey for spiritual entrepreneurs designed to help you stand out, speak your truth, and share yourself, your services, and your products with confidence, care, and satisfaction. It's online, and it's everything you need to jumpstart the expansion of love in your life and business, dissolving the effects of a fear-based mindset, holding you back, keeping you stuck, and tripping you up. If that tickles your soul, go to mariaestella.com/journey to find out more. Today I'm joined by Stacey Simmons. Stacey is a psychotherapist who, in the course of her psychological research, discovered that we have had a secret archetype hiding in plain sight for generations of Western history. The divided woman archetype, which we will be diving deep into in this episode. In her practice, Stacey sees mostly creative professionals and successful performers who come into treatment surprised and shocked that they are caught in the archetypal powers of the divide. She writes on media psychology and the unconscious on her blog. She's written a book on esoteric principles of miracles and manifestation called The Keys of Sovereignty, Magic, Miracles, and Manifestation Beyond the Law of Attraction, and is currently completing the interviews on her next book, Crowned, From Divided Woman to United Queen, that will be released in 2019. I hope you've got your pen and paper ready because this episode is packed with powerful wisdom and knowledge. Here is our sacred conversation. Hallelujah, hallelujah. I don't know why I feel like singing, Stacey, but as always, I have a good feeling about this episode. Well, I do about almost every one of them. We are going to be diving deep into the Queen archetype, something I know that you have a shit ton of wisdom and knowledge about, and I am so thrilled that you're here, and I'm looking forward to having you share your wisdom with our listeners and viewers. To start us off, I would love for you to share, just for those who don't know, like, what is an archetype? Because we're going to be diving into the Queen archetype, and there are many archetypes, but what is the Queen, not the Queen archetype, what is an archetype, like in generally speaking, what is an archetype?
Right. So generally speaking, the idea of archetypes has been around for thousands of years. Like if you go back to Aristotelian philosophy, Aristotle and his forms, those are archetypes. The idea that there is a fixed thing in our imagination, that when you think of a chair, that there's a universal chair, right? That's an archetype of a chair. But archetypes are essentially ideas, but they carry meaning in them, right? They carry loads and loads of cultural, structural, psychological, emotional, spiritual meaning, and they're universal. Every culture shares archetypes. So they go across culture, meaning every culture has a hero archetype, a mother archetype, a father archetype, a god archetype, a self archetype. You cannot have a culture without archetypes, and every culture shares a certain number of archetypes, right? And what has happened in the last 150 years is psychology picked up on archetypes as well. And so you have Carl Jung and James Hillman and Marie-Louise von Franz, they took the idea of archetypes and really distilled them down into a much more kind of approachable way of understanding archetypes in modern contemporary psychology. So that when we think about archetypes, we not only think of some supernatural idea, which is unfortunately what happens in our culture. We tend to we don't understand something, we make it supernatural, which is silly. But rather that it's a mystery. We can't know an archetype. You can't, if you put a face on an archetype, it loses its meaning, because now you've now given it a face, right? You said, now this archetype is Mary Magdalene. She's no longer that archetype of the ostracized woman, or of the wife of the savior, or of the archetype loses its meaning when it gets named. And the other thing about archetypes that is really important for human beings to understand is that archetypes don't really have humanity. So when you force people into archetypal places, meaning you put celebrities, for example, on a pedestal, you put your parents on a pedestal, an archetypal meaning, you strip that person of their humanity. You put them in the archetypal realm. And that is very dangerous from a psychological perspective, both for ourselves, if we do it to ourselves, and for the people who we might want to elevate that way, right? We put them in that role. So an archetype is essentially a collection of ideas that is packed with history, psychology, spirituality, identity, and it is universal across culture, but it has unique faces in your own culture and your own identity. And you yourself will have many, many archetypes that you'll carry. You'll have your own mother archetype, your own father archetype, your own self archetype. And there'll be many others, like hero or child or God or savior. Like those are all going to be unique to each individual person, to each individual culture. So.
Boom, we started. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist, psychologist, or a psychotherapist. So I'm just absorbing the knowledge. Thank you for that. Okay, so thank you for laying that foundation, because that's really a strong foundation for what we're now going to be diving into, which is the Queen archetype. But I'm the question that comes up for me now, I didn't know when I was going to ask this, but is you've really dove into the Queen archetype, but I'm just curious, what made you choose that one? I'm not going to say her, because you just said if I say,
well, it's still her. It's still her, because it's particularly feminine. I didn't actually pick her. I think she picked me.
As is often the case.
She picked me. And what happened was I had been working in I'd worked in entertainment for a long time, and in academia before that, or in between, I should say, because I worked in entertainment, went and got a PhD, and then I went back to entertainment, worked in a university in between. And so I wound up going back to school to become a therapist. There's a big story there, but when I did that, I decided to write my thesis on how women were portrayed in family film, because I was working in animation. And I thought, okay, this would be fun. I'll go through the Disney filmography from Snow White until the present day, which at the time was Frozen, and see how women are portrayed. What do they look like? What do they sound like? What are the characters like? And the place where I went to school is called Pacifica Graduate Institute. It's this amazing place in Santa Barbara. And they said, well, this is great, but that's a book, and you have to write a thesis, which has a page limit. So you need to cut this down.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wound up just looking at that time, the two most recent Disney films, which were Frozen and Maleficent. And what I found when I looked at them was that that each film had two characters that were in relationship to one another, that were resolving a relationship between the two sides of the feminine.
Oh.
And that at the end of each film, the resolution resulted in a coronation.
Oh.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And so that led me to both those two characters and the coronation, right? And
Yeah.
so as I looked at it, I was like, okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What is this idea of the coronation? What is that? What is happening there, right?
Mm.
And what I learned through the process of doing it started with the research in those two films, and then I went back through the canon, through the entire Western canon to which I'll get to in a second. But what I learned was that there is a sovereign queen at the core of every woman's story,
Mm.
and she wants literal sovereignty over herself. She wants to be the one who makes all the decisions for her own body, for her own mind, for her own career, for her
Mm.
own money, for her own place in the world, how she navigates, where she goes, what she does, who she is, everything. That is sovereignty. There's a quote by Albert Pike: sovereignty over oneself is called liberty. Right.
Mm.
And so if we truly expect women to have liberty, real liberty, then we
Mm.
have to have sovereignty over ourselves. And the
Mm.
symbol of sovereignty is a crown.
Wow.
That's the queen, the woman who has absolute sovereignty over herself.
Okay. So how do we get there?
Okay. So getting there is a different story. So to get there, I have to tell you the story of the two characters who showed up in the research, right?
Yeah.
So
Go ahead. Because I'm
looking at
also
these two,
wondering about Disney. I'm like, do they know, what, because the good thing about what you're saying is that image is being planted into millions of
of
children
little girls,
across the world.
it is, and it was fantastic. I'll have to send you a picture. When I did the research, I was actually really thrilled because I had seen, I love animation. It's one of my favorite art forms, and probably my favorite art form. And for my birthday one year when Frozen came out, my friends took me like, let's go see Frozen. And I was like, okay, great. And I was so mad because I wasn't doing my research yet. Right. And I was like, I hate this movie. Singing snowmen. What is this? And then when I started researching the film, I realized it's like, no, it was perfect.
Mm.
And what it is that the collective is shaping these films, right?
Mm.
The collective conscience of all of these women filmmakers, because there are a lot of women filmmakers at Disney, and these, people who are understanding what it means to be a woman in our culture right now.
Mm.
They are the ones that are shaping how this message is going. And if you look at the arc of these movies over the last 90 years, you see it. It is so fantastic.
Yes.
If you look at the original Snow White, 1937, right? You got 1937 Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Snow White is this ingenue character. She's innocent. She doesn't ever do anything wrong. And then the opposite, the other side of the character, is the evil queen. She doesn't even have a name. She doesn't have a name, Mary Stella. She's nameless. And she's evil. She's pure evil. She just wants to destroy Snow White, right? And her and ambition drives her. And so they couldn't be more far away from each other. And over the course of the 90 years between Snow White and Frozen, those characters come closer and closer together until they're sisters, and they're sacrificing for each other and loving each other. And then then what happens in the story of both Frozen and in Maleficent, they are freed. Both of them are freed by their sacrifice to the other one. That's the story of the queen. So, and I'm getting there. So I got excited about the movies.
No. I'm like totally in. Yes, but I also cut you off, and we got to get back to that. But yes, go ahead.
So what happens is those two characters are the characters that make up the queen, right? So Snow White and the evil queen, Elsa and Anna, Maleficent and Aurora. Everywhere you look, whether it's fairy tales, movies, stories, our own individual selves, we're always divided. At the heart of every queen is a divided woman.
Yes.
So that's the core story, right?
Yeah.
And this is a process that happens when we're little girls. And what I found in my research is that there are two constituent archetypes underneath the queen archetype, the united queen archetype. And they fall into very traditional tropes. And what I've tried to do is I've given them new names because I didn't want them to become stuck into old archetypal patterns. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and their names are just their behavior, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
So the first one is very familiar to us. She's kind of the traditional feminine, receptive character, the good wife, right? She's the ingenue, and she is, I call her maiden in search of relationship, or just misor, right? So she's always available, and she's maiden not because she's always virginal, but because she's always youthful, right? She's always portrayed as available, youthful, sexually available, but not sexually active, right? She's portrayed as, being young looking, being nubile, always attractive, never all that stuff that we associate with youth and young, young maiden-ish. So she's maiden in search of relationship. And she's always protected. She has relationships. She's good at relationships. She's good with having friends. And she's not just good at relationships with men. She's also really good at relationships with other women. She's a good friend, right? She shouldn't be denigrated. Those skills are good skills. The other side is the character I call, or the archetype I call magical, isolated, powerful, and endangered. That endangered being really, really important. Because where the misor is protected by her willingness to be available, the mipe, magical, isolated, powerful, and endangered, is isolated and shunned because of her power and knowledge. And thus she is unprotected, which makes her endangered. Right? And she's always looking for protection. She's always trying to protect herself or make sure that she's got a tower at her disposal, or that she's making lots of money so nobody's gonna take it away from her or hurt her, right? But she's always isolated. So if you think of these two characters in movies or in theater or plays or literature, it's like Elphaba and Glenda from Wicked, or it's Anna and Elsa, it's Aurora and Maleficent, or it's, if you start looking, which is what I did after I looked at the movies, I started looking at the Western canon. It's Demeter and Persephone. It's the Madonna and Mary Magdalene. It is Lilith and Eve. Right? So this divided woman archetype is everywhere. And I didn't expect to find it. Like I was writing a thesis on cartoons, right?
Yes.
And here comes the queen. She's like, here's your work. Yeah, get to work, get busy.
Yeah. And oh, by the way, this will take the rest of your life. Here you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Plop. Enjoy. Have fun. Which is fine. I'm fine with it. I'm happy with my mission. Yeah, I'm good. But it's hard because, you look at it and you're like, wow, I had no idea. And so I started mapping it out first by looking at films and fairy tales and the work of Marie-Louise von Franz. And she had looked at fairy tales, but she hadn't found this. She'd broken down the structure, but both her and Jung and Joseph Campbell, they'd all been looking for what is the women's story, because there's a hero's journey, right? But where's the women's version of that? And I think this is a women's version of that, because I could never understand where I fit in the hero's journey. There was always something missing for me about this. Where is the thing where I get beat up for being a girl? Where's the thing where I beat myself up for not being perfect? Right? Where is that in this journey? Because it's not on this piece of paper. No. With the,
So tell me about, there's a story you say that there's a path. There's a path. Thank you. So there's a path. And what are the paths? What's the path?
It's kind of complicated. I will send this to you. It's really big.
Oh, gorgeous.
Yeah,
May I,
so
is that because I want to share that with people, so
yeah, I'd
we'll
be
make
happy
sure
to
that
share it.
they can go somewhere and sign up for it or download it or
Yeah,
something. We'll make sure that, so, and also if people are listening through the show notes or through the podcast, Stacey's showing me a gorgeous circle, and I'll leave a link in the show notes so people can access that. Yes.
absolutely. Well, I'll
Mhm.
make sure that we get that for your
Yeah.
listeners. But it's a very complicated journey, very
Yeah.
much like the hero's journey, but I call it the path of the queen.
Yeah.
And what happens is at the very beginning is once upon a time,
Yeah.
right? And once upon a time denotes that there's a disruption in the natural order of things.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, there's a
Yeah.
disruption in the natural order. And that disruption is the birth of this girl because she has her own life-giving properties. She can create life all on her own. So she disrupts the natural order all on her own. And in the first part of her life, she's undifferentiated. She doesn't know, there's unsure which path she's going to go on. Is she going to be Misor or Mipe? And what happens is around the time she's 8 or 9 years old, she doesn't know which path she's going to be on. And she doesn't even know that there is a path.
No.
She's just playing with other girls, playing with boys,
Yeah.
playing with her parents, playing with her dog, playing out in the woods, doing little girl things.
Yeah.
And there's this occasion that introduces her to the two paths. And in stories, it comes with a mark or a curse, right? I've even heard in real life that that some people have told me stories of, especially women from like Eastern Europe, that when they started their periods, their mothers slapped them. In real life, that happened. And it's like, wow. But that's an example of the mark, right? You're marked.
Yeah.
And if you look at some films, like in The Color Purple, it's the first time that Mr. slaps Celie, right? It's the curse that Maleficent puts on Aurora when she's a baby.
Yes.
For real women in real life, it's that moment when we realize we're different.
Yes.
Because every single one of us does that around third or fourth grade or in primary school, when we go, wait a minute, I'm not like the other girls.
Yeah.
And we think that no one else is doing that.
Yes.
Right. And it's because we're starting to notice that we don't fit the ideals of the archetypes.
Yes.
Right. We're starting to notice that we're not in the archetypal realm. That's when we start to notice that there is an archetypal realm and that there are these two paths that we're going to be enjoined to one of them.
Yeah.
So we start to try to see if we can straddle those categories, if we can straddle those paths.
Yeah.
And something happens where we can't. Either some trauma happens. For a lot of girls and women, it's a sexual trauma at that age.
Yeah.
For other women, it's being ostracized either by parents or by the other girls in school.
Yeah.
And for others, it's by being absorbed. And sometimes that's a trauma, being absorbed into a patch of girls or a group of girls and ostracizing the others. Right.
Yes.
And I know almost every woman that I've talked to can identify with this journey. Like we've all had this thing. Right. And so we're pulled into the category, and then we're either Mipe or Misor. Right. And if we're Misor, then we're with a group of girls, we're braiding each other's hair at recess. You know, we're talking about what we're doing with our family or with our boyfriends at lunch, you know, and we push away the Mipe girls. Yeah. And if we're the Mipe girls, then we desperately want to be with the Misor girls, but we know we can't. And so we isolate. Maybe we hang out with boys. Maybe we try to do more masculine things or sports or science or things like that to try to improve our knowledge, because that's what Mipes do, right? They want to have knowledge and power. They are magical. Yeah. They're good for seduction. Yeah. So they're also often seen as a seductress, right? Yeah. And so we grow up with these two columns of womanhood.
Yes.
And around the time that we get to be in our 20s, we have to commit to one of those. Yeah. And it's usually around the time we go to college or university, and we say, okay, I'm going to commit to one of these roles. The problem for real women is that society puts you in this archetypal place. And like where in the beginning, we were talking about archetypes.
Yeah.
You can never live in an archetype.
No.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
And so you're constantly measuring yourself against a standard that doesn't exist.
Mm.
And you're always ostracizing, whether you're Mipe or Misor, you are always ostracizing the other part of yourself.
Yes.
Battling against a society that says you should be the other thing instead of the thing you are.
Yeah.
And so while you're doing that, you're not looking at what's happening to you out in the culture.
Mm.
You're not looking at what's happening to women. You know, I live in the United States, and that's so clear and obvious to me right now with what's happening here.
Yes.
It's like, okay, we want women to be archetypal, not real. We don't want any real women here.
No,
we don't know real women with real problems. And
and please not with any power, or like, please don't be angry.
Yeah, don't be angry. Can't you smile?
What?
Yeah. It's like, why don't you smile? You look so pretty when you smile.
Yeah. I'm trying to because I can't help but try to relate to my own story, and I'm like trying, and I want to encourage those who are listening to do the same. Like when Stacey's talking, like where do you find yourself in the, when you talk about your 20s, there's something that is inspiring to go back and see where was I in my 20s, and what was I doing, and how can I because ultimately I suppose that the wisdom that you share and the experience and the knowledge that you're sharing is really for the uplifting and for the resolve and for the and that's what I hear as well. So I'm trying to figure out I'm not really sure. I think I must have been I was probably I probably wasn't a good, I think I was perceived as being a good girl, but I don't think that I was.
I think you're probably a Mipe with some really good Misor skills.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would make sense to me. Yeah. And I also can't help but think, because, for me, I work, part of my foundation is, the divine feminine essence and the divine masculine essence, and also their shadow aspects. And one of the most important things for me is to have the integration of those two, so it's not, and, you don't ostracize the shadow selves, because if you ostracize those, then you'll lose out on all of the lessons that they have. And it sounds to me like the Mipe, is that what you call her?
Yeah, the Mipe.
Sounds like she's actually the realm of the shadow, or could be. Maybe I'm just really
could be. It's hard because I try to avoid those. That, I mean, it's very Jungian language as well, but I try to avoid some of that because it has become kind of loaded. Because her gifts, the Mipe's gifts, are self-sufficiency, persistence, intelligence, magic, power, life. Yes. Like those are the Mipe's gifts, right? And those aren't really shadow gifts. Those are very powerful light gifts, right?
Yes. And that's when
and she has a shadow side, right? If the Mipe goes, so what happens is, on that circle that I showed you on the path of the queen, they as you go through the cycle, the second half of that, so in the 20s, becomes the rendering, when the woman is split in two. So she's on a path of either she's Misor, Mipe, and she's living in that place.
Yes.
And then if she doesn't start to resolve her divide, right, and she goes into the third quadrant, divided, and she doesn't try to resolve, then she runs the risk of ending her story in the third quadrant, which is it's the danger zone. I call it the depth, and it's the place of the greatest danger. And it's that's where happily ever after is. Because if you think about, what does it mean to be happily ever after? It means your life the story is over when you get married. Right?
And most people when you get married in their 20s or their 30s, and they live to be 100. That's a long time.
That's a long time, right? Yeah. And if you look at some of the older myths, if you look at the story of Demeter and Persephone, for example, Persephone is the Mipe. You would think Demeter would have been Mipe, but it's not. It's Persephone. And Persephone goes to the underworld and she marries death.
True.
Right? And so, no, I take that back. I said that the wrong way. She's the Misor. I said it wrong. You would think she'd be the Mipe. She marries death, and her life is over, metaphorically. Right? She gets to come back, a couple months out of the year, hang out with mom. That's her unification.
Yeah.
But
so is this why we're seeing some, because I don't know if what's it like in the US, but there's so like is it sounds to me like this could be the reason for all of the divorces, because these women are the divided women, and then they've chosen that path, and once they awaken, then they realize, oh, not that they're not supposed to stay married, or that they are supposed. I'm not passing judgment on people getting divorced at all. You can do what you want, but it sounds to me like the awakening of her is actually, that's when she starts to reunite herself, and so in that journey she realizes, oh, marriage was not it. Because I knew for me, it was never, a house with a white picket fence and the car and the big fluffy dog. That was not for, I always knew that was not for, not that I don't mind, I'm all for relationships and so forth, but I just knew that was not. But I'm also wondering or questioning actually now, was that part of, because I was part of the me pay, and so that was part of the story that I automatically assumed, because being that quote unquote sub archetype, that would then mean that is not for me. And now I've done a shit ton of work over the past 10 years, I'm like, it's not that I so I'm having revelations as we go through. I'm wondering.
You got it. You're on it now.
But
you got it.
Okay, so in the 20s,
and so by uniting, becoming a united queen, by claiming your sovereignty, right? But you unite your me pace self with your me source self. Yes. You allow receptivity into your life.
Yes.
And that then says, yeah, okay, I could do a relationship. I don't have to do it the way everybody else does it.
No. And also, I don't need a relationship. I want, for me, like whenever I work with people, that's very important to me. Like, there's a difference between need and want to. Mm-hmm. So do I need to? Need to comes out of a fear-based, usually a fear-based mindset of thinking that you're missing out or lack. Whereas want to is like, oh, this is something that I would want. That's abundance. That's, prosperity and so forth. So I'm just seeing those, those arcs. That's so interesting. Okay. So once
relationship's a choice.
So she makes, in her 20s, so I'm assuming, I don't know, but I know when for me it was, how old was I? I was 30 through 30. I was 30, somewhere around between 30 and 33. Something happened. So so tell me, so you said that in the 20s, the path, she's choosing one of those paths. So when does she realize?
So it's usually in the 30s into the 40s, so that she starts to make the choice of whether or not she's going to unify the divided woman.
Have you
sometimes it's earlier, sometimes it's later, but not always.
Have you looked into how it's related to astrology? I don't know. We never prefaced it, but I'm wondering, because I think that there may be some correlation between the some of the astrology. That's just for me. That this is even just a side note for me to check out later, because I think that there may be a relation to that as well. Go ahead. So somewhere in the 30s to the 40s, she starts to awaken, or what happens?
I don't know if I'd call it awaken, because what happens is as she goes through this experience of the rendering, there is a moment of, and it's a kind of a technical feminist theoretical word of abjection happens, right? Where an abjection means to completely divorce yourself from the other side, right? So when you say I had abject horror, it means I had to turn away. So this abjection occurs of the other side. And when that abjection happens, that's the most precarious point, because it says to you, are you really going to throw that other part of yourself away? And if you do that and you don't come back, it means that you kill that part of yourself. Yeah. You sacrifice it to the to the rendering,
Mm.
right? And the rendering's cultural. So you're sacrificing it to the patriarchy, essentially.
Mm.
And then what happens is either the Mipe becomes what Jungians call animus possessed, where she just becomes this complete caricature of herself, like Wicked Witch of the West, you know, corporate, money hungry, you know, the character from what's the movie from I'm thinking of the one with Glenn Close where she kills the rabbit, like that character.
Yes, Basic Instinct. No, not Basic Instinct.
Yeah, that's it.
No,
Basic
is it
Instinct.
Basic? No, the one where she kills the rabbit. No, that's isn't the 9 week 9. It's 9 something. No,
No, I think it's Basic Instinct. Maybe not. We'll figure it
Basic
out.
Instinct is with Sharon Stone and Glenn Close. It's called 9 week or week 9 or whatever.
We'll figure it out.
People will know what we're talking about. Yeah. Okay.
But so that kind of character that becomes just obsessed with power and having her way, like that's what happens for the Mipe if she abjects the Misor. And if the Misor abjects the Mipe, then she becomes one of those like horrible, grumpy housewives who like drinks in the quiet of her kitchen, you know, or just follows her husband around, or, you know, has 27 plastic surgeries, you know, that try to make herself young forever.
It sounds very unfulfilling, and you know, they're like the word that I hear, like they're missing out on satisfaction, like, and I don't mean sexual pleasure. I mean like life satisfaction, like, because from when two wholes or two halves become whole, there's this
there's peace,
satisfaction.
There's being sated and satisfied. And that then you cut off that part of yourself, and then you can never be satisfied, because essentially you've sewn your mouth shut, if you will. You know, and that's what happens here, and in that moment, right? If the abjection occurs. Now, if that real woman chooses it after the abjection, if she realizes, I can't do this, I have to go back, right? I have to pull her back to me, which is what I saw in the films, right? Is that was played out in those films. Then she, you know, she gets to embrace that part of herself again and rediscover it. And she goes through this process of embodiment. Where she reintegrates the other half of herself. And in doing that, she experiences embodied transcendence, which is so powerful. And it shows up in films and in plays and in books and in stories as sometimes as she's having a baby, or sometimes as she grows wings, like in Maleficent, she gets her wings back, you know, but she, you know, she's embodied. It's not like in the hero's journey or in some of the Osiris and Christ-like myths where he escapes the body, he transcends the body itself. This embodiment this transcendence comes from being embodied in a female body that gives life to others. Pretty awesome. Yes.
And what I loved about what you just said is one of the crucial pieces about being quote unquote human is, as you say, the embodiment. For me, when people talk about enlightenment, there always seems to be this, see ya suckers, I'm taking off, I'm taking flight, you know, now I'm enlightened and all you suckers can just, you know, like do whatever you want on earth. But to me, the enlightenment is bringing light into the body. That is what happens. We we bring light into ourselves and we become the light, meaning we embody what you just described. That's so, and I can literally hear like coins drop everywhere. Those who will be listening to this is like, they will be seeing them. I can hear these women saying, okay. I can hear them like having all these moments of revelations and discoveries. And from what you're saying, because I mean, I'm just one, but it, you know, all it takes is one. So I can see myself in all those. I'm like going, okay, that's when that happened. And that's when I know exactly when the abjection happened. I know exactly when I was like, that's not good. But the thing is, you I think you kind of skipped like crucial part, like you went from abjection to embodiment, like
Right.
in a flash. That's not really, and maybe it's just me, maybe I just haven't found, the golden path. But to me, the road, the path from one to the other was
it can be painful. It can be very
it was
painful.
painful. It was dark. It was, I think, I always knew, and I think that we all know that what you're talking about is an opportunity, like it's a possibility. And I think that's why we go on the path, because we know, even though, in those dark moments, there have been times when I've been like, I wish I'd known what I know now. And I probably wouldn't have been so dismissive of the women or the people trying to tell me that was a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I also know I probably wouldn't have listened, because, nah.
I know what I'm doing. I'm good.
Yeah. So that path, like in between those two, would you talk a little bit about that?
So the first step is seeing the other in the mirror. Yeah. It's the mirror. It's called a mirror moment, right? Yeah. Where you, at least that's what I call it in my research, is where you look in the mirror and you see your sister self. Mm. If you read the story of the descent of Inanna, literally Inanna sees Ereshkigal in the mirror. Mm. When she has nothing left. She doesn't even have a body left. And she stands before the mirror, just her soul. And she sees her sister, Ereshkigal, who has imprisoned her, by the way. And she realizes that the only way out is through. Yes. She has to make peace with her sister, Ereshkigal.
Yes.
Right? And in that story, she has to trick her. And she has to get the help of another woman. Who was her right-hand person in her war council, was her handmaiden. Yes. And that's who helps her out of literal hell, right? Because she's in the underworld. Yes. She has to face her sister, and that is the first step. You have to have a mirror moment where you say, okay, because I'm definitely Mipe. That's me. I'm like, give me all the degrees, give me all the money, give me all the power, give me a tower. That's fine. I'm good. Yeah. Fine. And I had to look in the mirror and have this moment, and still every day have this moment, I have to add, where I look in the mirror and say, okay, I'm scared. I have to be receptive. What will I receive? Can I allow things to happen instead of forcing things to happen? Because I'm so good at pushing. I can push all day long. Yes. But the receptive is, allowing the baby to form in the womb instead of trying to force it to form in the womb. Right? Yes. One of my favorite jokes is, doesn't matter how many men you put on the job, takes 9 months to make a baby. Like, true. Things have to cook. Yes. And so you have to allow them. And whatever your primary subarchetype is, whether you're Mipe or Miswar, the mirror moment is about recognizing the other's gifts in the mirror. Yeah. And seeing which ones you have to take on in order to be whole. Yes. And it doesn't mean you give up your primary one. You don't stop being you. No. You just allow more of the other one. Yes. And stop denigrating it. Yes. Yeah. Yes. That is so profound and powerful. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also hopefully empowering for anyone who's listening or watching to know that, like, if that's where you're at, you're actually on the path of integration. And if you haven't gotten your moment of abjection yet, maybe this is it. Like maybe this is the time for your mirror moment. Mm-hmm. Because I know that for me, that's the integration that had to happen. I think, I can't remember if I shared this with you off camera, but 7-8 years ago, I was, as a successful key account manager, I had acrylic nails, I had blonde hair,
pencil skirts, high heels. Everything was the way that I thought it was supposed to look like.
Right.
And today I'm not. And it hasn't been, it's not been a rejection or an abjection. It's just been a matter of, as you say, an integration of really looking in the mirror. And I also, even though I've done a lot of work, to me, it's also still, I think it, quote unquote, true mastery comes when you realize that that work has to happen daily, on a daily basis. You don't, or maybe I'm just not, enlightened. It's just that to me, it's a continued work, like being willing to continuously see yourself mirrored and look in the mirror and see where else can I, what else can, yeah. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And I think you do. I think you have done that work. I think your description is perfect.
Yeah.
Because the work is not to, it's not, the work is the opposite of what we think of when we think of examination, right? When we think of looking at ourselves for flaws and what we have to fix, like that's not this work. No. This work is looking in the mirror and saying, what do I have to love over there? What do I have to, what do I have to bring into my body? That is the embodied transcendence. What am I doing to bring in that thing that I have told myself that I hate? Yeah. Like I used to be 110-pound anorexic, and now I'm a 200-pound, chubby girl with big butt, and I have to bring both of those together.
Big butts and I cannot lie.
And I have to bring them together. I have to say, I don't hate that little anorexic girl, and I don't hate that chubby fat girl. Like, I love both of them. They are both me.
Yes.
They're both me.
Yes. And that's why I over and over and over again tell people who, like, those who think that spiritual work or personal development is, very woo or, light, is like, you haven't walked through a dark night of the soul and just like been stripped or felt stripped of everything. Yeah. So, you mentioned earlier, I can't help but ask you, because you mentioned Mary Magdalene, and it's so interesting how she has become this, well, at least because it's not even, the thing is, when I first started this work, I thought it was actually, she was mentioned in the Bible as a whore. She's not named or in the Bible as a whore. There is a Bible, and I'll tell you this, and I've shared this before, but if people haven't heard it, about a year and a half ago, I was having a conversation with a dear friend, and I was talking about my work and how, Mary had showed up, and not necessarily Mary Magdalene, but the energy and also the consciousness and the collective and all that was showing up. And I told him how, listen, she's not a prostitute. She's not, and he said, and his answer to that was, but does it matter because Jesus saved her? And I was like, does it matter? Like, do you realize because the thing is, the Catholic Church has actually, because it was based on a sermon that some pope in 500 and something did. He made the assumption that because she was carrying what's it called? Frankincense. No, was it frankincense? Yeah, it's because she was carrying, I think it was frankincense, because she was carrying that oil that she anointed Jesus with, or the woman who anointed Jesus with that oil. That oil was very, very, very expensive. And he said the only reason that she could have had that oil must have been because she was a prostitute and she was using it for her body but that was the assumption that was done based on a sermon back in I think it was 591, year 591. But that was retracted by the Catholic Church in 1969. But the problem is, the idea that she was a prostitute still exists to this day, even though she's not mentioned. And for me personally, I believe that white Christianity, because I call it white, white Christianity based, that's the basis for white supremacy, white racism, like not white racism, but racism, for institutionalized race, all of that. Like,
yeah,
there's
it's not true Christianity.
It's just so based in that. And then, why am I saying this? So it's because they've taken out the feminine side. They've actually cast her out.
Right.
And I believe that the patriarchy, the quote unquote, not the patriarchy, but I believe that the men suffer equally as the women does for the abjection, I would say, of the feminine.
Yeah. I agree completely.
But you mentioned Mary Magdalene. How does she fit into the queen archetype in your, or how does she fit into this work? Why is she showing up? Like, why are you showing up now? What is it you want us to talk about?
She's the Mipe to the Mary of Mother of Jesus' Misor, right? So she becomes the foil to the Misor there, and when you pull those two together, they're a united queen. They're both named Mary, for goodness sake. Like, it's and Mary in Latin, Mari is the ocean. It's the mother. It's it's the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it's, for me, it seems kind of an obvious play on words, like mare, mother, like, okay, so but she's the mipe. She is the abjected part of femininity that exists in the Catholic and Christian faith. Like, she's the part that nobody wants to look at. She's the part that was powerful. Even if you look at our modern retelling of her story, she was, whether you believe it or not, the modern retelling of her as Jesus's wife, right? That is the powerful story of a woman who has power in the church.
Yes.
A woman who has an identity of her own.
Yes.
A woman who is not going to be, pushed aside by a bunch of guys, however powerful they may have been.
Yes.
She's the consort to Jesus. Well, that's pretty powerful.
Yes. Yes. And to me, she was a master in her, like, and that is something that is mentioned in the Bible, that she is the apostle of the apostles. So like, why would yeah. Okay, Stacey.
And it was spikenard, the ointment.
Yes.
It was spikenard.
Yes, true. It was spikenard. Thank you. Yes. Wow.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't? Is there anything that's still left that you want to share? Because
there is. We haven't talked about the coronation, right?
Oh, the coronation. Sorry, go ahead.
When you pull all of that together, when you have that, when you are able to consistently be your own woman, defend your own territory.
Yes.
Right? It becomes a part of it. Defending your own territory. The territory is yourself.
Yes.
And whatever land you lay claim to, meaning your job, your profession, your family, your home, whatever.
Yeah.
When you can rule without needing to depend on someone else, and when you can seek counsel from men or women without needing to get their approval, then you are a queen.
Yes.
And you can have your own coronation. And I'm actually putting together a training it's called Coronation Training, so that, at the end, you and your friends, you go through this training, and then you hold a coronation. You guys crown each other. Like, absolutely.
Yes.
Because that is a symbol of owning yourself. You own yourself, and we deserve that.
Yes.
And as women, we rarely get it. Like, we're constantly confronted with the images that we don't own ourselves, and that's simply not true. And we have to fight for it.
So imagine a world made up of women, of coronated women, like made up of queens, true queens who own themselves. Because in that, when we're able to hold space for ourselves, and we're also able to hold space for others holding space for themselves.
That's right.
And it becomes an uplifting.
Yes, ma'am.
Rather than a trying to tear each other down.
That's absolutely it. That's absolutely it. Because becoming queen is not about holding power over someone else. It is about holding power for yourself and uplifting those around you. I wrote a small, I do these things called short fairy tales on my on my Instagram.
Yeah.
And one of them was that I realized that the collar of chains around my neck was actually my crown. And all I had to do was cut the chain and move it up. And we all have that same binding.
Yes.
But we don't have to.
No.
We don't have to. We can cut those chains. It is all a matter of perspective. It is all a matter of making choices in our lives of how we choose to live, how we choose to see each other, how we choose to see our sisters, our partners, all those abjected parts of ourselves, our children, animals, the whole thing. We all have the capacity to choose.
Yes.
So.
And of course I love that, love is the key to that. Like true love, not the airy fairy, but because loving yourself no matter what is probably the hardest thing. It's one of the hardest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also at the same time, when you master it, one of the most satisfying things.
Yeah.
Because it's not dependent of anything in this world.
That's right. That's right.
That's like, that to me is true sovereignty, is when you are so quote unquote full of yourself that you do not, that your joy, because it's higher than happiness, because to me happiness is a feeling, it's higher than that your fulfillment, your satisfaction is not dependent on anything in this world.
That's right.
That to me is sovereignty.
You got it. You got it. Absolutely. See, you are a queen. You got it.
Well, I don't know. See, I probably am a queen, and then at times I am not.
But that's a good thing. It's a good thing because you can't live in the archetype. No. Nobody can live in the archetype.
No, that's such a point, that because it's also because one of the things when I whether I teach or coach or facilitate, because it's so easy, that's actually one of the things I've always been very careful about is shining the light back, because it's so easy for us to put people on pedestals, and I've had it too, where and thus it's so easy to tear us down and to be to tear others down for and especially if for some reason the idea of social media comes up. But when we because in social media it's so easily to tear people down rather than ask yourself the question, reflect on what they've said. So, well, this was this was seriously mind-blowing, which I knew it was going to be. I'm going to include all of the links for your sites and your things in the show notes. So if people want to see that and follow that, then they can go ahead and find the show notes. They're in the either under the video or in the show notes for the episode. I don't know what else to say, but thank you, Stacey. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for this, your journey. Thank you for your path, the path that you've taken. Thank you for your wisdom and for your knowledge and for your experience and for your willingness to share it with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about it. I get a little nervous sometimes about standing on it because that's my work, right? It's who am I to do this? But the work wants to be told. So I'm just trying to take every opportunity to share it. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you so much.
That is what I had for you in today's episode of the Magdalene Voices. For all of the deeds and the details, find the show notes on my website, mariastella.com. Know that I would love to hear how it resonated with you and what you got from it. So tag me on Instagram or leave me a comment on either my website or YouTube. Finally, if it served you, please take a moment to share it with a friend or on social media. God bless.